So, in late 2016, Netflix made a categorizing error that accidentally put the horror film The Babadook in their LGBT movie section. Now, if you haven't seen it, The Babadook is a fantastic and unnerving horror film about a single mother being driven to the edge by some malicious spiritual force of nature. There's a few ways the film can be interpreted, but there are no LGBT characters, and any queer theming would be a significant stretch. So yeah, somebody in Netflix put a check mark in the wrong spot, The Babadook ended up in the LGBT section. Good for a chuckle, not a big deal. But then Twitter got a hold of it, it spread like memes do, and the idea of The Babadook being a queer film began to take a life of its own. Articles were written to try and tie some queer themes into the film, some of them just for fun, some of them actually pretty serious, and the idea gained so much traction that The Babadook basically became the unofficial mascot of Pride Month 2017, with costumes and posters and charity screenings of the film. It got kinda weird, honestly. Then, last month, the new It film came out, and some people tried to make lightning strike twice by making the film's evil clown Pennywise a gay icon. Some artists even had him dating the Babadook. This idea doesn't seem to have stuck quite as well. It feels more forced and less organic than the Babadook thing, and while the Babadook at least has some interpretive wiggle room, it's more of a metaphorical and ambiguous threat. Pennywise is just a straightforward, child-murdering, shape-shifting space monster, and maybe we shouldn't be conflating child murderers with LGBT people. There's enough assholes doing that already. It's an odd trend, but one that opens up a lot of discussion of queer horror cinema. Maybe we're a bit starved for it? I mean, if we have to take random horror monsters and make them queer after the fact, that probably says something about certain underserved markets. I went ahead and googled queer horror cinema, and the first result was an article from The Fader titled "Queer Horror is Having a Moment Right Now." It cites that 2017 is an especially good year for the idea of queer horror, and lists these 4 films for the following reasons. Personal Shopper, because Kristen Stewart's clothes are a bit masculine. Get Out, which has a blink and you'll miss it scene implying that Allison Williams' character dated a woman once. The Blackcoat's Daughter, which is a Satanist take on the girls' boarding school scenario. And Raw, where the main character has a gay roommate. Woo. If that's the cream of the crop this year, it's no wonder we're converting the Babadook. Of course, there is a long, storied, and varied history of queer themes and characters in horror over the last century. Books have been written on the subject. You can get a 10-hour documentary on queerness in just vampire fiction. Horror cinema owes a lot to LGBT creators. The directors of Nosferatu and Frankenstein were both gay men. But in terms of actual LGBT content, it's been mostly reserved for subtle theming and innuendo and the occasional homoerotic forlorn glance that'll slip past the straights in the audience. But you know, oh yes, you know. When actual queer characters do show up in horror films, it's not often that great. This tends to reach its peak with the monstrous crossdresser, from Norman Bates in Psycho to Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs to the Bride in Black in Insidious Chapter 2. Yes, this character is still a thing. So I suppose the question is, what does good, direct, queer horror cinema look like? Well, if you haven't figured it out by the title of this video, it would probably look like a polished version of 1985's A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. Elm Street 2 is a film that audiences have been gradually finding a greater appreciation for over the years, both as an entry in the series and as a piece of queer cinema. I remember back in the early 2000s, poring over sites like X Entertainment and, iMockery. Is iMockery still a thing? Holy crap, iMockery's still a thing. Anyway, entertainment sites like that would dismiss this film because it didn't follow the series formula close enough, and then they would probably throw in a bunch of gay jokes. It was 2002, it might as well have been the Stone Age. So if you haven't seen it, Elm Street 2 takes place a few years after the first one, with the Walsh family moving into Nancy's old house. Teenager Jesse is having scary dreams about a guy with knives for fingers and has been waking up screaming pretty much every morning. At his new school, Jesse makes friends with Lisa, a girl who seems pretty interested in him, but he's only really lukewarm towards her, and Grady, a guy who's really just a jerk to him, but I guess they're best friends now. As you probably guessed, Jesse's being haunted by Freddy Krueger, but this story is more about possession than the killing people in their sleep plots the series is known for. Freddy's aim is to influence Jesse into killing people for him.
You've got the body. I've got the brain.
Freddy's influence seems to be more tangible this time around, his influence causing effects during waking hours, like the temperature in the house getting up to nearly 100 degrees, or one of the pet birds exploding. This tangibility manifests in full when, through Jesse, Freddy Krueger arrives to the waking world fully formed and starts attacking an entire party's worth of teenagers.
You are all my children now.
Many people have taken umbrage with this because it doesn't really fit in with the larger franchise. Freddy going Wolverine adamantium rage on a group of awake teens is about as far removed from all the times Freddy slipped into his victims' dreams, played with their fears, and killed them in a gruesomely ironic fashion. Now, I don't care for this scene myself because I don't think it's particularly well executed, but I just can't stand by these criticisms. There was no rest of the series at this point. This was only the second entry in something that nobody was even sure was going to be sustainable as a franchise. The fact that future installments went down a different path isn't this film's fault, and the fact that it didn't play by the rules of the first film just means that it was exploring what the idea of Freddy Krueger, dream ghost serial killer, could actually accomplish. It was trying new things, and we here at the Pop Arena love it when people try new things. The series did largely abandon these ideas of possession and haunted house antics and settled into a string of increasingly goofy and ironic dream murders, with Freddy Krueger spouting one-liners and killing people with Nintendo. A Nightmare on Elm Street basically became a series of dark comedies, which is fun, but they also insisted on sticking to this formula over and over and over again. Elm Streets 3 through 6 just blur together in my memory. I can remember the individual death scenes pretty well, but I can't ever place them to their movies. Which movie had the girl turn into a cockroach? Elm Street 4? Alright, I'll take your word for it. The series really wouldn't try to experiment again until the meta-antics of Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which isn't my favorite film in the world, but at least my memories of it are clear, as are my memories of Elm Street 2. As for the idea of the film breaking the rules of the first movie, I'm not so sure it's that clear-cut. The reality of the film always seems to be right on the edge of collapsing, like there's only a thin membrane between the waking world and Freddy's dream realm that Freddy is poking holes in. By the half-hour mark, you don't really know what's real and what's demonic influence anymore. It's like if the ending of the first Nightmare on Elm Street was the entire film. You're supposed to be questioning if this is real or not. Now, it's cheesy, and weirdly lit, I'll give you that. The entire film seems to have one too many light bulbs on in any given scene. The special effects and makeup are totally a step up from the first film, but fall under heavier scrutiny because they're so brightly lit. But this is all garnish, of course. The meat and potatoes here is the film's queer content, and for that, we have a buffet, starting with our main character, Jesse. First, Jesse is notable in being the only male protagonist for the entire series, filling the same role as characters like Nancy and Alice. Not quite the final girl role, since this isn't quite a traditional slasher, but Jesse is still put in the role almost exclusively filled by female characters in slasher films. The Elm Street franchise may not have found its groove yet, but this was 7 years after Halloween. The slasher genre definitely had. The Friday the 13th series was already 4 entries in. This was post-Prom Night, post-My Bloody Valentine, post-Slumber Party Massacre. The language of this era of horror films was well known by general audiences, and that language said that Jesse was playing the feminine role. To quote Red Letter Media, you may not have noticed, but your brain did. The film introduces Jesse in a dream sequence where he's riding a school bus, looking timid and uncomfortable in the back, placing him as an outsider to the rest of his normal classmates. He acts a bit more confident while awake, but with this being a dream sequence, it's more representative of his internal persona. He tries to present as masculine. He has a big, beefy car that he hotwires every time he starts it because he's too cool for the keys. He plays sports, and he hangs out with a cute rich girl. However, in moments of privacy or being caught off guard, like when he's spooked by Freddy, he displays more timid and, yes, feminine traits. From the way he screams, to the famous scene of him cleaning his room by putting on a collection of sparkly 80s glasses, dancing to Touch Me All Night Long by Wish and Fonda Rae, and holding phallic toys in suggestive positions. And then there's the casting. Mark Patton is himself gay, which doesn't mean anything, of course, but he believes he was being typecast into this role. His most famous role before this was playing a pre-transition transgender woman in the Robert Altman film Come Back to the Five and Dime, Jimmy Dean, Jimmy Dean. In fact, Mark Patton was so worried about being typecast as a gay actor playing queer characters that he pretty much quit acting after this film. It wasn't an unreasonable fear. This was the mid-80s, not the best time to be gay. Was he cast because of his sexuality? Hard to say, wasn't in the room. But babyface Brad Pitt, John Stamos, and Christian Slater also auditioned, and the filmmakers decided that Patton had a certain something over them. Is that fair to Patton? No, but I strongly suspect it was a factor in his casting. Thankfully, he seems to have embraced it over the last decade or so. And then there's, the actual stuff that happens in the movie. At the midpoint of the film, Jesse decides to walk out of the house in the middle of the night while it's storming in nothing but his pajamas, and go to the local gay bar that he's never been to. He probably didn't even know where it was before this. It's clear that he is at least partially under some magical influence. It's here that he runs into the gym teacher, Coach Schneider. We had a scene earlier where Grady was spreading rumors that Schneider went to these kind of places and was a gym teacher so he could ogle sweaty teenage boys. This seems to be true, and Schneider takes Jesse back to the school and forces him to run laps. This is when Freddy, using Jesse as a vessel, does his murder thing. First pelting Schneider with balls, then tying him up in the shower, then snapping towels on his ass before finally killing him. Sigmund Freud would be like, okay, whoa, guys, cool it, we get the idea. Later, during Lisa's party, Jesse and Lisa try to get intimate, but Freddy's influence starts to manifest as body horror. Jesse freaks out and ditches Lisa to go to Grady's bedroom, where he spills the beans. Jesse is just far more comfortable talking to Grady than Lisa.
There's something inside of me. And last night it made me go to my sister's room. And tonight with Lisa on the cabana, it started to happen again.
I think you are seriously losing it, bro.
I'm scared, Grady. Something is trying to get inside my body.
Yeah, and she's female and she's waiting for you in the cabana. And you want to sleep with me.
Again, this was 1985, so it took a while before people like screenwriter David Chaskin started to admit the film had intentional homoerotic subtext. Some people still claim they had no idea this was how the film was coming off, including director Jack Shoulder, which, come on. He's either lying or he's the most oblivious film director of all time. How could you be that unaware of the film you're in charge of? Ultimately, Freddy Krueger is defeated with Lisa professing her love for Jesse, causing Freddy to lose his grip and presumably be banished. A lot of people have taken this ending to mean that straight love wins in the end, that Jesse has overcome his homosexual desires as manifested by Freddy Krueger, saying that gayness is something you can overcome. Except I don't think that's an accurate reading, because the film doesn't end on this. It ends with another scene on the school bus, revealing that Freddy was not actually defeated. It's basically the same ending as the first film. There, Nancy presumably defeats Freddy by denying his power over her, which seems to work, but then Freddy's all, nope. It's the same here. Jesse and Lisa think they can banish Freddy by being a straight couple, but sexuality doesn't work that way. You can't fake it till you make it. Jesse's still gay, so Freddy still has power over him. I don't think this is creating a parallel between a magical serial killer and queerness either. Jesse's uncertainty of his sexuality is what allows Freddy to get into his psyche and manipulate him. Trying to be straight didn't work. Coming to peace with his homosexuality, that might have. It's undeniable that A Nightmare on Elm Street 2: Freddy's Revenge... Actually, Freddy doesn't get any revenge, he's just doing this as strangers for kicks. It's undeniable that Elm Street 2 is a queer horror film. This is only becoming more and more recognizable with every passing year, and this video is hardly pointing out anything new. There are plenty of articles on the subject. Pretty much everything the film deals with, from the themes to the characters to even the casting, expands the film's queerness. But is it good queer horror? It's definitely not perfect. With so many crew members, including the director, insisting they had no idea what was going on, either because they were kind of afraid of what they were making or they really were just that dense, the films aren't quite as focused as they could be. While I choose to take the message of the film being that you should accept your sexuality or things are going to get twisted, this is a film from 1985, and demonizing queerness was certainly in the realm of possibility. This was only 5 years after Cruising and Windows. There is totally an element here that is trying to use gayness to make the straight audience uncomfortable. The whole thing really needed a better communicated thesis, and better horror lighting while we're at it. All that said, it's still the most deliberate piece of queer horror cinema out there. Not the best horror movie with queer themes, but a film where its queer themes are the most thoroughly integrated and important. It's a bar that I don't think anyone's really successfully jumped. A challenge to creators to put down their Babadook Pennywise slash fiction and create something worthwhile for the community. A film that...
The changing tide can get you down. When you try to call her, will she be around? The land is...
Wait, they're releasing a Carmilla movie? Oh, never mind, that bar's been cleared. Whoa, never mind, yeah, you can put Elm Street 2 away. We got a bigger queer movie now. Carmilla's really good.